Okay, welcome to hashtag 52 Boundaries. And this week we are talking about work-life integration, because work-life balance doesn't really exist. And I haven't really found any other word for it. And I'm so delighted to have with me Lindsay Adams, AOAM, who is known around the world as the relationships guy. And I can't tell you how much it means for me to have him here, because if there's anybody who knows about this topic, it's him. We've had a long conversation about this, and I think we're in agreement that this is an important topic right now, especially since we are working so much more from home and the boundaries between work and life are getting more and more blurred.
Angela, it is an absolute pleasure to be here with you today.
Thank you. Welcome, welcome.
Thank you.
So when we talk about boundaries and we're talking about, let's say, soft boundaries around work, what does that look like?
Well, it's an interesting one. Boundaries, I think, first of all, my position on boundaries, really important. You mentioned about work-life. What was your word for it?
Integration.
Integration. I talk about work-life harmony. There's no such thing as work-life balance, as you correctly identified. And really, I think boundaries are an integral part of that work-life integration, work-life harmony. So, there's different kinds of boundaries the way I see it. There's soft boundaries, rigid boundaries, and even really, spongy boundaries, so to speak. So it kind of depends. I mean, if we start off and think about, what are some of the boundaries that we put around ourselves? I'll just give you a funny example. I'm married. I have 2 kids. I now have 4 grandkids. I'm a truly blessed man. We used to have this fantastic family tradition called Friday night family night. And our kids would come home. This was prior to them having children of their own. Anyway, the kids would come over Friday night. We'd have dinner, the 6 of us. So my wife, my daughter and her partner, my son and his wife, and we'd sit around the kitchen table and, catch up on the week and what's been happening in your world. And sometimes they'd stay and sometimes they'd eat and go. It didn't matter. We just hung out. It was lovely. So there's this one funny thing that happened, which created a boundary in the Adams family. So we're sitting at the kitchen table. My wife, Debbie's in the kitchen. It's all the same room. She's in the kitchen at the other end of the room preparing dinner. And then I hear her say, "Oh, should I get out my iPhone too?" And I looked up and there's my daughter and her partner, and there's my son and his wife, and I all staring at our mobile phones, not talking to each other.
Right.
So you might now guess what that boundary could be. No mobile phones at the family table.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's a soft boundary and sometimes it's a hard boundary and other times it gets a bit spongy. But it's such a simple thing. We were not in conversation. We love each other. We hang out. The whole idea of Friday night family night was to be there for each other, yet here we were glued to, I don't know, whatever it might have been, Facebook, Instagram, whatever, And so it's really a matter of what are the important things in life that we need to build a fence around and make that part of our life, our routine or whatever. So when we come together now as a family, phones stay off the kitchen table. Really simple. A simple boundary which creates quality conversations and gives us a deeper opportunity to connect and be there for each other. So, funny, silly, ironic example, and yet a good example.
Yeah. I don't have the Adams family scenario when I have friends over, because I think generally we all keep our phones off the table because we know how much easier it is to stay present when we don't. But when I run training programs, for example, I ask people to take the phone off the table and turn the vibrate off. And then I say, you can, and this is a flexible boundary for me. So it's not rigid, as in you cannot under no circumstances answer your phone.
Yeah.
But what I say is, if women are in labor, buildings are burning, and lives have to be saved, please, by all means, leave your phone on the table. But otherwise, please take it off. And the same thing goes again. I mean, when we're talking about work-life harmony, negotiate when you have your phone present and when you don't, right?
Correct.
A lot of people, they are available 24/7. I mean, I sometimes send out, because I mean, we're talking about flexible boundaries. I work for myself. So I have flexible boundaries around, I take a half day off here and then I work on what people call a weekend. So I might send out a message, but I know that there are people who work regular working hours during the week, and they are entitled to a weekend where they don't answer their phone, they don't write emails,
Yep.
and they still do.
Yep. Yep. So here's an interesting fact for you. I've been now in self-employed since full-time since the 3rd of July in the year 2000. So we'll call it 23 years.
Mm-hmm.
When I first started working, I had this great idea. I was going to work 4 days a week.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess how many I ended up working? 7 days a week. 7 days, sometimes 8 days a week. It was just like crazy. And I've got really strict now with the boundary around my personal life and my business life. If you allow it, work, your business, your employment will gobble up your life, and you won't even, it'll happen that quick.
Yeah.
And so I'm very strict now about Friday afternoon, I'm done. And I try not to, and I'm not perfect. I try not to do work on Saturday and Sunday. Now, look, I'm self-employed. There are times when you just have to, and it's like, as you say, it's flexible.
Yeah.
However, I'm much more rigid now about the delineation between work and family, or work and play.
Yeah.
And I'll often be sitting here in my home office. I work from home. I'll stay here until about 6 p.m. at night. But once 6 p.m. comes, that's it, I'm done. Now, physically, I'm knackered anyway, and that's a technical term. I'm worn out. But also, again, it's another boundary that you have to have rest. And the other thing is, I'm married, and I've been married a long time, 45 years this year in June, right? It's a long time. We work hard at our relationship. And the reason our relationship is so healthy and so successful, we still love each other, we enjoy spending time together, is because we built boundaries around that special time, that relationship time. So from 6 p.m. at night, I go and sit on the couch on the lounge beside my wife, and we have dinner together, we'll watch TV together. Now, there are some TV shows that Debbie watches, they're not my thing. And yet I will sit there beside her because we're in relationship. It's a boundary. Now, this is where it gets to be a spongy boundary sometimes. She might be watching her favourite detective drama, which in my mind are a bit formulaic, and, I can tell you what's going to happen before they start. So I might read a book, or I might do some Facebook or whatever on my phone. So it's a bit of a spongy one.
That sounds more flexible to me, because you're taking care of yourself.
Yep. Right? Yeah, well, that's another way of looking at it.
Yeah. Well, spongy means you're doing things to appeal to other people or to get their approval. But when you have flexible boundaries, you're going, I'm deciding, and I will accommodate you. So, you're accommodating her and yourself. That sounds pretty good to me.
But here's the thing, no matter what, we can still talk to each other. We can still, if she goes, aha, and I look up and go, what happened? Or I'll laugh or make a comment, and we'll, a bit of a side conversation, then off we go on a little EV or book pathway again, Yeah. But again, it's about the boundary around that relationship time.
Yeah. Well, I grew up with a father who was the exact opposite to you. He had very rigid boundaries, and he made it very clear that work always came first.
Uh-huh.
I'm not judging him on that, and I totally understand why he did it. There are lots of reasons for that, and I know that he did the best that he could, and he knew that, and I know that was the best that he did. He thought that was serving us. But he would literally prioritize work over anything. He would drive us. I mean, several times he drove us to our holiday destination, dropped us off, turned around and drove back to work, and left my mother and my brother and me for the time of the holiday, and then would pick us up, because time at work was just so prioritized. I mean, he achieved his goals, but at the cost of his family. So that's why, I mean, for me, this is a really interesting topic, because I know that I was able to do that too, and I decided not to do that. And I had to learn to, because we grew up with this huge work ethic. If you were not on your deathbed, you definitely worked.
Yeah.
And if you weren't working, no good.
And it's interesting, because in the Adams family, and I learned this from my father, we have, what I call the Christian work ethic. Mm-hmm. And that is when you're at work, you're working, you're not slacking off, you're here to either earn a living or contribute, to your boss or, whatever paid employment you might be part of. So, and I think to a large extent that's rubbed off on my children as well. They all work hard and have good careers, and they also make time for their children. And so family's a really strong value for us, and that's come to me all, from my forebears and the same with Debbie's side, so the two of us are very strong believers in looking out for our children, our grandchildren.
Yeah. Well, I think what plays into this work ethic as well, and that's something that a lot of people are not really conscious of, or if they are, they're not necessarily acting on it. I know that for me, again, I needed to work in order to get my value and get that sense of I'm contributing. But I also had this sense of guilt when I wasn't working, but there was also resentment when I saw other people take time off. And I had the same choices, but I didn't make them because I was just so in this belief system that I had to work in order to be, contributing and valuable and fulfilling my purpose and ethically. And, there was a whole raft of beliefs and values attached to that. So I had to overcome this whole feeling guilty and feeling resentful, which is not a great mix.
Yeah.
And once I got rid of that and I was able to relax purposefully and with ease, and work equally purposefully with fun, life became somewhat easier.
Yeah. It's interesting. I did a coaching assignment with Domino's Pizza. I was working with their head office people, which is here in Brisbane, many, many years ago. And I was assigned a number of senior people in the organisation. And I worked with one of them. I won't say what position, I won't say his name, obviously, but he was working really long hours. And he would be there. I said, what hours are you putting in? And he said, well, I'll be here at, 7:30, 8 in the morning. And I said, what time do you go home? 9:30. I went, oh, wow. Are you married? Oh, yes, I'm married. Do you have children? Yeah. Oh, yes, I do. Oh, how old are your children? I have 2 daughters. They're 6 and 8.
Yeah.
I went, what? I said, when do you see your wife and your children? Oh, I see my kids on the weekend and my wife before I go to bed. And I went, what? I said, we are going to build some boundaries around this. So we talked about it, and it turned out his wife was studying at university. So I said, so where does she do her study? He said, oh, we've got a large family room, and she's got a desk, and so she does her study. And I said, would there be room in that same area for you to do work at night? And he said, oh, yeah, I guess. I said, right, a new boundary for you. From here on in, you're home now every night, no matter what, by 6:30, and you're going to sit down at the kitchen table and have dinner with your wife and your 2 daughters. And you'll engage in family discussion, talk, laugh, play, whatever's appropriate. Then after dinner, you're going to take your girls to the bathroom, brush their teeth, take them into their bedroom, tuck them into bed, read them a bedtime story, and then and only then can you go back to work in this family room area you've got. And while you're there working, your wife can be on the other side of the room studying. And that's what they did. Now, this is, Angela, one of the most beautiful stories of my career. I bumped into this couple at Coles at the supermarket. They lived, not, believe it or not far away from me. I bumped into them, and this guy said, oh, this is Lindsay Adams. And this woman looked at me and she said, you're Lindsay Adams? I went, yes. And she said, thank you so much for giving me back my husband.
Aww.
And, like the most heartwarming story. Now, did it impact on his job at all? No. Did he get as much work done? Yes. And he had the luxury of being with his kids who, think about it, two of the most important people in his world, and his wife, the next most important person. And they were still able to, she did her study, he did his work, And then I guess they finished at some time or other, and I think they managed to, watch a bit of TV or whatever they did after that. I don't know, but you know what I mean? It's not that hard that we can put boundaries into our life so that we make space for the important stuff. And I think that's where a lot of people forget the importance of a good boundary.
The thing that I see a lot is people don't negotiate them. There's, again, in partnership, there's the expectation that you should know what my needs are around time together, around, my time for myself, because I'm somebody who's a typical ambivert. I love being around people, but I also need time by myself. And to negotiate that. It took me with my ex-husband. I actually had to say, darling, when I say I want to spend some time by myself, that does not mean that you have to come in every 10 minutes and check if
on me.
if I'm okay. So we negotiated that when I was alone, I wanted to be alone. And if he really wanted to work on, if he wanted to do his contribution, then he could you'd prepare dinner or something,
Sure.
and pour all of that care into that dish rather than checking on me every 10 minutes, because that meant I couldn't relax. But again, a lot of people don't negotiate that, and they just accept that the partner is the way they are. And again, we've got this notion that, again, work is more important than spending time relaxing. And on the other hand is when somebody wants to be alone and wants to relax, surely, we have to contribute to some degree because we want to be in partnership.
Yeah. And, I think the energy recharge thing is a really critical one. And when we think about it, there's extroverts, there's introverts in the world. Extroverts, as we know, get their energy from people. Introverts get their energy from being alone and recharging that way. And so we have to, again, make allowances for that. And build fences or boundaries around, the recharge methodology. Yeah.
Again, I just had a client who, when we were talking, and he had just come back from running a marathon, and I said, okay, so was that time for you to just run and maybe explore, because it was in another country, and explore the country? And he said, no, I work the rest of the time. And I said, okay. I was a bit baffled, and I said, so how did you do that? He said, I got up earlier in the morning, and then I got in 4 hours of work, and then I trained a bit, and then I ran the marathon. And when I was done with the marathon, then I did the same thing. And I said, have you ever taken any time off in your life where you didn't work? Have you ever gone on holidays without your laptop? And he looked at me, and it was like I had asked him if he'd flown to the moon. Like, no, why would I?
Yeah.
And, it's actually important. And I threw this whole line out, which is actually, I didn't make it up. But science has proven that we do need to get bored, because it's like a defrag for the brain.
Okay, yeah.
We need to be able to actually stop and get bored. I always joke and say, Newton would have never discovered the laws of physics if the apple hadn't fallen on his head while he was sitting under a tree doing nothing, right?
Yeah.
But again, it's this whole thing is that we now think we have to be available 24/7 and work all the time. And we don't.
And, I think, again, these things are the cause of a lot of that, because think about it. Once upon a time, when 5 o'clock came, you weren't accessible for work. Yeah. Now it's 24/7. Yep. You sit on the lounge at night and your phone pings and you go, well, what's that? Oh, someone sent me an email. Oh, I'll just have a look at that. And instead of going, that'll be there for me in the morning.
Yeah. But they're different time zones. They might be in a different time zone. So it's important that you get back to them immediately. Maybe not.
Maybe not.
No.
And, modern communication, and don't get me wrong, I love it. I have friends all around the world, and it's so easy to keep in touch with them now, and you can talk to them for free. And, we've got this amazing technology, and yet in some ways we've become slaves to the technology, and we don't allow ourselves to step back enough. It's really interesting. COVID taught me some really good lessons. I was stuck at home for 2 years. Now, previous to that, started my career in the year 2000. I have literally traveled the world speaking, training and coaching interesting people. And when COVID came, of course, I had to stay home. And you know what? I didn't actually miss it. You know, I'm a platinum frequent flyer with Qantas. I'm not trying to big note myself. I'm on a plane a lot.
Yeah.
And I don't think I'm going to be platinum for much longer, by the way. And I don't care, because being at home for 2 years taught me that, I could do other things. And I've actually cultivated different business opportunities as a result of that, which enable me to stay home. And I get to spend even more time with my wife, which I love, and more time with my kids, but most importantly with my 4 grandchildren, who are the most beautiful kids in the world. Am I biased? Yeah, no. I am. And so, and I wonder what other lessons people have learned. And I sometimes wonder, do we ever stop and sit and think, what just happened then? Is it time to put up another boundary? Is it time to dismantle a boundary?
Absolutely. Well, my sense is this worked so well for you staying at home is because you already had some good boundaries around that work-life harmony that you mentioned. You had agreements with your wife, you had agreements with your family, you knew when to stop. But a lot of people went into total overdrive when they started working from home, and they started dropping all boundaries because they needed to be available 24/7, literally, because again, people worked in different time zones. We were working remotely. And there was this whole thing of, if I'm not right next to my computer or my phone, my boss thinks that I am not adding value.
Yeah.
Literally had people going, I'm afraid I'm going to lose my job if I'm not available all the time. So they started overworking considerably. And I said, have you ever considered that you would, the proverbial water cooler at work, you would have conversations with people there all the time. The average person works 3.5 to 4 hours every day on the tasks in their job that they're getting paid for. The rest of the time is all sorts of other stuff. But here we feel guilty when we go and rinse out a coffee cup at home, right?
Yes.
It's perfectly okay for you to go and put on a load of washing, or even go and do some shopping, because you've just had 4 Zoom meetings in a row.
Yep.
And you need to get your brain out of it.
It certainly is an interesting one. Apparently, Microsoft's productivity went up 20% in the first year of COVID when they sent everyone home.
Yeah.
And they were going, oh, wow, look at this. And it's really interesting, the number of organisations now that are reducing their floor space, their square meterage in their offices, because they're enabling people to work from home, because they realise that they're actually there's more of that harmony. They feel happier. They are just as productive. There was always this suspicion, if they're at home, can they be trusted?
Yeah.
Well, guess what? They can. Again, it's one of those other boundaries. We had this boundary that you had to be at your desk between 8 o'clock and 5 p.m. Actually, that boundary it's not necessary anymore. And then we've got to also make sure that we have the boundary correct on the other end, and that is that we are not chained to our electronic device in our home for our boss, forever and ever and ever.
Yeah. So this whole work-life harmony, integration, whatever we want to call it, is really that the laws have changed. The rules have changed.
Yeah.
We have more choice on one hand, and to a certain degree, less choice, because again, there's this notion that we are, as you said, we're chained to our electronic devices, when in fact we have choice all the time. But it's about recognizing what the boundaries are. What am I going to negotiate? What am I going to accept that's just the way it is? But where do I actually talk to people about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I bought a new watch recently. And now this is going to sound like a plug for Apple, but I bought an Apple Watch.
Okay.
I had a fake Apple Watch. It was a copy watch by someone else. Anyway, bought this Apple Watch. What it does, it enables you to set your rest time. So I set from 10:30 p.m. till 6:30 a.m. was my sleep rest. I don't sleep that long, but anyway. Now, what the Apple Watch does, 45 minutes before 10:30, it sends me a message and says, your rest time's coming up. So we're now going to shut down your watch. And so I no longer get notifications from 9:45, 45 minutes before 10:30, and then the watch goes into like dark mode, and I don't get bothered. And my phone, because they're linked, it's the same. Yep. And so I'm thinking, wow, it's an electronic boundary created for me by someone else. Well, I set the parameters, and yet I think, what a great idea. So no longer, my wife was forever complaining because I put the phone by the bedside table, and the thing lights up with notifications during the night. Oh, your bloody phone's always waking me up with the light. That doesn't happen anymore. So what a great boundary, provided for me by Apple, the free plug for them. But, I thought, what a clever idea, because again, we are too tied up with these electronic devices.
Yeah. So did you say 10:30 to 6:30?
Yeah.
That's exactly the time I've set for mine. I don't have a watch. It's on my phone. My phone goes into sleep mode at that time as well.
Yeah.
And I put it really far away from me as far as I can, because at 6:30, it goes bing, bing, bing. And I'm generally awake by that time anyways. But again, same thing as this. I don't get any notifications. I have pretty much turned off my notifications. I check my phone on a regular basis.
Sure.
But as far as I'm concerned, unless I'm expecting messages, then I enable them. But there's nothing that cannot wait for 10, 15 minutes or half an hour.
Well,
seriously.
so, I mean, this is an example I use in workshops. How often do we find in an organisation, we type out an email, we send it to Angela, and then we sit there tapping our desk waiting for Angela to respond. And then we ring Angela and we say, Angela, just sent you an email. Did you get it? Like, hello, why didn't you just pick up the phone? Why didn't you get in the lift and go to the next floor or walk up the stairs and go to Angela's desk and go, Angela, I got a question for you.
Exactly.
No. So again, it comes back to this instant world, speed of communication that we've grown accustomed to, which I think, we need to just put the brakes on a bit.
Which is what makes it so hard to detach when we go home, right? Because again, there is no hard boundary. We're not leaving the computer at work. We're taking everything with us. So there's this whole thing of keeping going. And when we have an agreement, again, with whoever, with yourself, with your poodle, doesn't matter, saying, this is my hard boundary. This is when I stop looking at my phone. This is when I stop looking at emails. I mean, I know that sometimes in order to get, we're not talking about daily, but I've had recommended to clients when they go on holidays, take these apps off your calendar, take your calendar off, take your email off, take, all of these apps that you use for productivity, delete them, because you can always put them back on again. Just remove them from your phone or whatever you're using, so you don't even have an opportunity to look. And I can't tell you how many times people say, man, the first few days I constantly picked up the phone to check, and then I realized I had deleted it and I put it down. But it generally took people 4 to 5 days before they started adjusting. So
this time last year, I think it's tomorrow, on the 6th of April, I flew from Brisbane across to Porto in Portugal. And I met up with one of my best mates. His name is Paul Taval. He's from the Netherlands. And we walked the Portuguese Camino together. And when I arrived, Paul said, I've got a new phone. I went, you bought a new phone? He said, no. I got this phone just for this trip. I've left my business phone at home, and I have an assistant who will monitor the phone. If anything's urgent, she will forward it to me. But he said, while I'm here, I'm only focusing on walking with you. And I went, whoa. And I said, mate, I plan to, be posting on social media and letting people know about where we're up to. And he said, you go your hardest if that's what you want to do. But I have chosen, so his boundary for our journey, 300 kilometres together, was to just be present in the moment without the interruptions of his business. And again, there's probably a lot of self-employed people who are listening, who are going to listen to this conversation. And I challenge them to put a boundary around downtime, time to recharge, to think, to relax, because a lot of people just can't disassociate. And that's another critical boundary.
Yeah. Get bored. See what happens.
Yeah, get bored. Yeah.
People around you.
I didn't get bored I got to tell you, but it was a lot of hard work.
Yeah. Yes. Well, I lived vicariously through, your food was amazing. I mean, I couldn't wait to see your food.
I got a lot of blisters too, but that's another story.
Yes. Well, we've had a lot of thought, and I think lots of ideas and thought starters for people to think about what are the boundaries between work and life. And again, work is life, life is work, but whatever we want to call it. But the idea is that we hopefully you get some idea of what you could do to make sure that you get maybe more out of life. Because when you get more out of life, you also get more out of work.
Yeah.
Right? There's no hard boundary between those things. I always say you take yourself to work, you don't leave yourself at home, but you can take yourself home and leave work at work if you want to.
Correct.
Right? So have a think about what you can do to create better, healthier, more effective, more functional boundaries. And thank you everybody for watching and listening. Thank you so much, Lindsay. And I look forward to seeing everyone next time.
It's been a pleasure.